Welcome to podcast episode 199.
One away from the big 200.
But today we have a guest for you, Anny Johnson of the Big Fat Blog.
No. I think we should leave that in. No, that's not what she's from. Try again. You can do it. The Big Fat Blog. Try again. We're keeping that in.
I don't know why. Sorry, everyone. It's not that.
It's not that funny.
I don't know why.
Okay, it's Anny Johnson, who is incredible. She was such a good guest. She writes the Fat Ugly blog, which is thefatuglyblog.com. It's no, sorry, Steph.
Can we start again? I think it's disrespectful.
No, do you think it's disrespectful?
Yeah, I got it wrong. I feel like it's disrespectful.
Well, no, now you've declared that, that you think it's disrespectful. I think it's okay. I want to keep it. People will remember it now. So we're doing Annie a favor.
Okay, well, I'll think about it. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So we have just had a conversation with Annie, and she shares with us her recovery story from binge eating disorder, going into treatments, what it means to her being a Black woman in recovery and in these recovery spaces. She is also cabin crew, and that's a job. It was her dream job. She's in her 40s, I think she said, didn't she?
She did.
It's her dream job that she only applied for and got a couple of years ago. And she is... what else? I wanted to say something about the body image stuff. She shares a lot about how she feels in her body and what the words fat and ugly mean to her and why she has continued to... Do you continue to co-opt something? Or if you've already... Can you continue co-opting or co-opting the original opting of it?
You can continue doing it. It's her book title, it's her blog title, it's her handle. It's very much a part of her message, but I think also the reclaiming of it is probably really relevant.
That's the word I wanted, reclaiming. Thank you.
Well, what I liked about speaking with her too is that she does not tie everything up in a bow. And even though she has made, I would say she's healed a relationship with food in many ways, right? And she's healed a relationship with herself in many ways. But it doesn't mean that everything feels dandy, and that there's not still ongoing things that she's working on and goals she's pursuing. So it's not like this, beginning and end kind of recovery story. It's still happening. And I thought she was really inspiring and relatable. That's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you want to connect with Annie, you can at thefatuglyblog.com or her Instagram, The Fat Ugly Blog. She has a book coming out. She doesn't have a release date yet, so you'll just have to keep your eye out for it. And that's going to be called Fat Ugly, I believe. Can't put blog on the end of that because that's confusing for a book.
I like the title, Fat Ugly. I think it's great. I think it's catchy.
It is. Speaking of great and catchy, here's the episode. So we did that thing, which we haven't done very often, where we've just started talking to Annie and she was just saying some really great stuff. And then we thought, crap, we better be recording this because this is all good fodder for the podcast. So I kind of want to dive into what we were just talking about before we hit record and invited you guys to come and listen to us. So Annie was telling us how she is writing her book called Fat Ugly. And your blog, of course, is called The Fat Ugly Blog. And on Instagram, you're The Fat Ugly Blog. And you were telling us about those words, fat and ugly. And I interrupted you to hit record. So I'm gonna, before we even hear your story, I want to hear your thoughts on why you're using these words, fat and ugly, in the work that you're doing.
So basically, I used to always just say, oh, I'm fat and ugly. I'm fat and ugly. If anything happened, it was like, I'm fat and ugly. I was at my heaviest and I used to say that. And then I lost a lot of weight and I was at my lightest. And I still would look in the mirror and go, I'm just so fat and ugly. And I think that's when I realized that it wasn't actually about my body or my weight at all. It was more about something else that was a lot deeper. But as I've gone through my treatment program and doing a lot more exploration as to why I feel the way I do about myself, I realized that I use the words fat and ugly to just mask anything that I feel. So if I feel lonely, it's like, oh, I'm just fat and ugly. If I even feel, oh, I look good, it's like, oh, well, I'm just fat and ugly anyway. So it was just easier to use those words than it was to actually face any type of emotion. And I think when I came out of my treatment program, I wanted a different perspective on those words, which was I was now entering a season of my, I call recovery or my life, where I was now having to face, what do those two words mean? And instead of just masking it, I'm now taking accountability for, okay, this is how I feel. I must feel a certain way if I'm using these words. What is it that I feel? Why do I feel that way? And ultimately, that's what my blog started off as. It was just a space where I could blog every week to keep myself accountable in my recovery. And I think the Fat Ugly blog, those words were just the sort of trigger that said, Annie, you got to think about what exactly are you feeling rather than just cover it up.
Do you ever find yourself thinking it still?
Yeah, I think this is why it's just been such a journey. I mean, I finished treatment in December 2020. And, I came out and I did my blog and I was doing some work with the NHS. And I then realized that I gained weight in my recovery. And these words were coming back at me again. And that was part of the reason why I had to take a bit of a pause in 2023, because I really had to address that, how I felt about my body, because I learned how to have a better relationship with food, but nothing really addressed how I felt about my appearance and gaining weight. It was almost like, okay, once you've been in recovery for 6 months, then you can like go back to Weight Watchers, and that's actually what my therapist told me. It was like, we don't talk about it. You just keep plowing on. And I think I then hit that point where I was like, okay, I don't restrict food that I eat. I don't do all of that, but I actually don't like how I look. And the fat and ugly was just coming up again. And it was never really being addressed. And I had to just take some time to really kind of try and go through that myself.
Mm-hmm. Just for the listener, when you're talking about going into treatment, that was treatment for binge eating disorder. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
You should probably hear your story, I think, as well.
Let's go back.
Yeah,
Let's
so
go back to the beginning. I'm also really conscious that something that is really important to you that we spoke about before you came on the podcast was around challenging a lot of the stereotypes around eating disorders, the types of eating disorders and the look of eating disorders. So anybody listening to this is not going to know that you are a Black woman. And so I just wanted to say that because I'm curious how that also weaves into your experience, if of course that feels relevant for you.
Yeah, no problem. I was thinking about this and I was like, I think my issue started when I was maybe like 7 or 8. And I first went to Weight Watchers with my gran. And, you get on a scale and there was this woman who, if they had gained weight, she would just like have a really horrible look on her face. If they lost weight, she was happy, she was smiley. And at 7 or 8 years old, I just kind of built that belief system that if you have gained weight and eaten badly, then you're a bad person and everyone's going to like hate you, not like you. And if you had eaten well and lost weight, then people would like you and they would be happy around you and you'd be pleasing to them. And I didn't realize that I wasn't going to Weight Watchers for me. I was going to Weight Watchers for my gran, because obviously I lived with my gran, so she would take me with her. And that was, I think, where it started. Like, I became really aware of my body and food and how I looked. That's where it started. And my gran, she's a grandparent, so she's going to feed you sugars and, cakes and all sorts of things. So that was her way of loving me. So I associated love with food, yet I still felt bad if I ate them because of, oh, I'm a bad person now, because of that belief system. And so throughout my life, I always had this issue with food, my body, how I looked and my worth, and how other people would love me or not love me, or be pleased with me or not be pleased with me. And so I just kind of went through life being quite a high achiever, because I got a lot of like validation from achieving at school and things like that. But I still inside didn't feel like I was worth anything or worthy, had very low self-esteem, and I found comfort in food. But it kind of became that secret thing, because I knew that, or in my belief system, I guess, I felt that it would make me a bad person if people knew that I was eating the way that I would eat. And so it just became this like almost like a double life. I remember like I felt like it was like what I call a living cell, where I'd have my life behind closed doors and then this high achieving, really encouraging, inspirational kind of person on the other side. I just went through life like that. I would travel, I'd have loads of friends, I'd be very social, but behind closed doors, the way I was coping with life and with my low self-esteem was just through eating and binging. And I did go through a point where I started dancing and I lost some weight and I felt a bit better, but I was still struggling with food. And then I'd always wanted to fly as a career.
Can I just add, you mean literal flying as opposed to like the metaphorical? I just want
Oh,
to fly
yes.
in whatever career I choose.
No.
Actually in an
No,
aeroplane.
in an aeroplane, yeah. I always, like, I started off wanting to be cabin crew, and then people would say, oh, you're too intelligent to be cabin crew. And I was like, okay, you could be a pilot. And I'm like, okay, I'll be a pilot. And so I just always wanted to fly. And it was literally like every door would shut, close. Like I could not get a job in an airline. And then I went to university, I studied aviation, I got a first class degree, came out and still could not get a job in an airline. And I think I was 29 and I went through a cabin crew course, applied for an airline, got rejected. And I just remember thinking, I'm lost. I don't know what to do anymore. And I was at my heaviest weight. I just felt like it's because I'm fat, it's because I'm ugly. This is why this hasn't happened. And I ended up leaving the country. I spent 3.5 years in New York, wrote a book called The Worst Book I'll Ever Write, found some kind of validation again in, okay, I'm an author now. This is something that can give me, I don't know, just a sense of I've done something, I've fulfilled something. But still, it was like, I remember for the first time being in New York, having this creative world and also a spiritual world where I felt free to express myself. It was the first time where I was basically saying to people that I just wasn't happy. I didn't love myself. And I never told them about binge eating or my relationship with food, but it was just starting to share how unhappy I had been in myself. And then my gran had a fall and I ended up coming back to the UK to look after her. And I was at my lowest weight. I loved how I felt, but I still would look in the mirror and go, oh, I'm so fat and ugly. And then my gran passed away. And that was like, I don't even kind of describe it. It was just like such a dark time. And from then I just really, binging just started again. And I didn't want to be around people. Fortunately, I had a job. So I would go to work, come home, go to bed, go to work, come home, go to bed. And all I did was eat. That was the love, I guess, from my gran. And even when she was on like the last weekend, she was in hospital, she was saying to me, have you got dinner? Have you got something to eat? So food then became the thing for me that kind of helped me through that time. And so she passed away in 2017. And it was in 2019 when I think it just all came to a head. And I remember one morning just waking up, just being like, I can't go to work. Like, I just need 2 weeks off so that I can lose some weight. I need to focus, Annie, get yourself together, go to the gym every day, eat well, just 2 weeks where you just focus on you. So I decided to go to the GP to just try and get 2 weeks off so I could focus on losing some weight and feeling better. And she was amazing and just probed and asked questions, and she was really kind and just came to a point where she said, I'm going to give you 2 weeks off, but I want to refer you to what we call talking therapies. And I will add here as well that she was actually a Black GP, and I just felt comfortable talking to her about my gran. So she signed me off. I was referred and I spoke to somebody at Talking Therapies. And I think when I realized I had a real problem was when she told me how many calories they would class as binge eating disorder. And I was like, I laughed and I was like, well, I eat so much more than that. And that was probably the first time I realized that I actually had a problem. But I also doubted it so much because I'm like, I'm a Black woman. I'm 37 years old. I don't know. I don't think, like, we don't get eating disorders. Like, that's not, we probably eat more than other races do, but I'm a Black woman. I don't get eating disorder. But at the same time, I'm like, but when I'm listening to what she's saying, it's like, that's exactly what I do. And she was like very clear, like, this is what it is. And we're going to get you some treatment and stuff. But it was also like a relief, like, oh, there's not something actually wrong with me, but also like, but am I just like making this up? Or is this really a thing? I don't know. But what it did do is it allowed me at that point to really be able to share with some of my really close friends and family. And they were really supportive, and even some really close colleagues at work, just really supportive. And it was COVID, so everything was done remotely. And I had some sessions before the 3-month program started. And it was a group therapy program. And in that group, there was like 2 other Black women. I think it was like 6 or 7 of us at the time. And it was just one of the most liberating things ever, because you realize that actually it's not just me and all this shame and this other life I've been living. Other people experience this too. And as well, just I had a lot of people that would call me after my sessions, and friends that would just really be interested and want to help in terms of support me. And that made me feel really comfortable to go through it.
How was it for you to shine a spotlight on this? Because it sounded like you're going, oh, this is just me, this is just how I am. And then when you're told about this binge eating disorder and the amount that would come under the classification of binge eating disorder, and you're suddenly being confronted with your behaviors in a different way. Some people find that a bit particularly challenging to actually look at their behaviors more closely, which going into treatment often requires. Can I just ask what that bit was like for you?
If I'm honest, when I was first diagnosed and they said I was going into treatment, the first thing I thought was, finally, I'm going to get some professional help to lose weight. Like, that's what I thought. That was my very first. I was like, finally, they realized that I need to lose weight and they're going to help me. And this isn't just some slimming club. This is like doctors and therapists, and they're going to help me do this. So I think that was probably why I was really like, yep, when can we start? Let's do it. But once I got into it, I think that's when it got really hard, because I remember in my first session, we were told that we had to eat 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks a day. I did, like, that's when I really knew something was going on in my mind, because I was just like, are you actually crazy? Like, I cannot eat that amount. I just can't. Because when you think about it, like, if I binge, it's like, well, tomorrow I'm not having breakfast.
Yeah.
Like, it's like I'm making up for that. You know, I'll fast for a few days if I just, have eaten too much. But now you want me to eat like 3 proper meals and 2 to 3 snacks. And I remember going into my session and literally in tears, like, I just can't do it. I just can't eat that amount of food. And it took a little while for me to really understand that this wasn't about losing weight. This was about healing my mind and the way that I think. And it was hard. It was so hard because I didn't want to gain weight. But at the same time, I think there was just that part of me that knew that because I'd had that thought of, I know this is not just about my body. I know there's something more, because I'm still at my lightest weight. I'm still saying I'm fat and ugly. I know there's something going on. I knew that I needed to address something else, but it was just still very hard to do it because I was scared of gaining weight. So yeah, I think the answer to the question is that I didn't go into it like, oh my gosh, these are my behaviors around binge eating and I need to solve them. It was like, oh, this is a great weight loss opportunity to get the support I need. And it just turned into something different. And I found it really challenging, like the self-monitoring. This is just like being tracked and all of that kind of stuff.
I'm curious because I know for me, a structured program, my rebel just feels too strong for that. I didn't recover through a structured program. And it sounds like yours was very structured. The idea of self-monitoring and then a therapist or another person seeing that, I would have played all kinds of mind games with my food diary. If I don't know, I know previously when I tried to keep a food diary, I might have had some biscuits earlier. And then later on, I want some as well, but I just kind of like lump them together in the same, you know what I mean? Like these kinds of little ways that my rebel would show up. So I'm curious, just from a rebel perspective, like, I don't know how strong you experience your rebel or what that part, how you, because in my mind, I'm like, I don't think I could have done a structured program, even though I know it does help a lot of people.
Yeah, that's where I would say my academic side came in, because I'm very much like in education. It was more about, okay, I've got to get this right. I've got to do this properly. But I think my biggest problem came afterwards when I didn't have that person there to, and also.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Did you identify with restriction at any time? Like the
It wa-
fasting that you mentioned or compensating when you were talking about how if you'd had a binge that you've thought about it like, okay, well, the next day I'll just make up for it. Was
Mm.
any part of you identified with restricting to compensate for binges, or do you just think of yourself as binging?
I think at the time it was very much focused on the binging. That's how I saw myself, as someone who binged. For me, fasting, I started fasting more from a spiritual place. And that even created some problems for me because connecting with God was like fasting was part of that. So I almost felt like by telling me not to fast, I almost felt like, oh, I'm on my own. And in the long term, it has impacted my whole faith and everything as well. But no, initially, restriction wasn't even something I really understood as part of binge eating disorder or binge eating in general. And it's actually only, like when you go in, like going into the program and them saying, I remember just being told, okay, you've got to eat 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks a day. And even if you binge, it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. And I was just like, are you what? And I think that's when I started realizing what I was doing,
Right.
became more aware of it. But also I got more understanding of the impact of restriction on binging after I finished my program, and I was kind of doing a lot more work and, you seeing more stuff online around binge eating, how restriction can impact that.
Yeah. Considering what you do for a living now as cabin crew and your hours and meal times being all over the place,
Mm.
obviously the whole point of the regular meals is to create that rhythm with food. How does this translate now in terms of flexibility around meals? For some people who recover from binging, it's like these meals, having them is almost like taking medicine. They have to do it. For other people, they can have a bit more flexibility. And I'm curious, with a schedule that's all over the place, how
Mm.
do you find even just that sort of structure and getting the regular meals in?
I don't know if I do. I would probably say like when I finished therapy program and the 3 months I did it, I did try to be quite structured, but I also think at that point, like you said, I had that bit of rebel where I was like, I don't want to do it this way. I don't know how I'm going to work it, but this just doesn't work for me. I cannot eat 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks a day. I just can't do it. And I had stopped binging at that point. So I think I went into a place of focus more on how am I thinking about food rather than this is the structure of what I've got to eat. And I did gain weight and that impacted me. And then when I started flying, that brought up a whole load of other things around how I felt about my body. But when I started, I was in such free flow, like, do you know what? I'm not going to restrict things. I'm going to eat what I want to eat, that you get on board. And it is very difficult to, number one, eat foods that actually, for me, are good for my body and at the right times and all of this. I think probably the first 2 years, I just didn't restrict myself. I just ate when I wanted to eat and ate what I wanted to eat. And then I gained some more weight.
Yeah.
And I think this is where I've kind of moved into a new chapter in my story when it comes to the Fat Ugly blog. Is now I'm learning how I can still like maintain my health and do the things that are good for me and my body within the context of me being cabin crew and flying, because this is my dream job. I probably wouldn't have got it if I hadn't built the confidence having gone through what I've been through. But I create my own little ways of working. So for example, I call them like my mini routines. So if it's a landing day, this is what I do. If it's a day of departure, this is what I do. If I'm on board, either I've taken some food or I just eat whenever I want to eat on that flight. Like if I'm down route at different destinations, I know certain places I can go to get foods that I like. So I try and like do it more bite-sized rather than this is the week, this is what I have to eat every day. It's just, well, landing day is very different because I can get home at like 7 a.m. and I'm sleeping till like 2 p.m. But then if I'm at home all day, I'm waking up at 6 a.m. and then going to bed at a normal time. So I can't have a whole week or this day every day. And what I try to do is just have mini routines within the week that can be flexible with my routine. But I will say that I am still working on actually doing that because it's not easy.
I found it tough just when I went to New York for 2 months a couple of years ago, and I found that really tough getting into a new rhythm. And I'm not rigid about my meals, as in like has to be at these similar times, but even just finding foods that I liked that I knew would be satisfying, knowing when and where I wanted to eat. I found a lot of that quite challenging, and I felt like my appetite was disrupted for some of that time just for that reason. Not to
Yeah.
mention, I'm thinking tiredness as well and doing shift work. All of that makes you hungrier as well, reportedly.
Yeah.
Huh?
And I think in some ways, I do feel like the fact that I decided, okay, I'm going to just go through this program and do what they said has really helped me, because I do think that I have a healthier view of foods now than I did before. So it just means that I don't have that kind of, oh, I'm beating myself up because I've eaten this. Or, like I find it really difficult sometimes, like you say, like I'll go to America and I don't particularly like the food. And so therefore it's very hard. I can't take food in. So I find it quite challenging because I'm like, well, I don't want anything to eat, but I'm still hungry. So in a way, I'm restricting because I'm like, I do want to eat, but I don't want to eat any of this stuff. And that can then lead to, I get on board and I'm like, just eating. And I'm like, this is not satisfying me. This is not satisfying me. And I just end up eating because that's what's there, rather than this is actually what I want. So, yeah.
How do you cope with that? What I hear from people is that there's guilt about that. Oh, I'm not giving myself the satisfaction, or I'm not eating the way I should be in order to be in recovery, and that can feel like you're doing something wrong.
Right.
How are you thinking about that now and giving yourself grace or not about it?
I think that's where the recovery guide that I created when I finished treatment was like just the 10 takeaways, top 10 takeaways from my treatment program. That was so important to me in retraining myself to think. And one of the things, the main thing was just self-compassion. And I've really, if there's nothing else I've done, I've really embodied that, and understanding that even when I have been like, oh, I'm just eating all this stuff, but I'm not hungry, or not that I'm not hungry, I'm not fulfilled in what I'm eating, so I'm eating more. The one thing I'll say is I don't beat myself up anymore, whereas I used to. And that then allows me to just keep going instead of that taking me down in some kind of spiral. Obviously, I get moments where I'm like, oh my goodness, I've just eaten all this and I didn't need to, but I'm then able to just go, okay, Annie, it's okay. Like, you're okay. And that's the kind of talk that I have with myself is,
Yeah.
and I often say, like, with self-compassion, I think of it like a little, I don't know if you've ever seen those laundry hangers where it's got like a hook at the top and then the little things that come out, and then you clip things to the end of it. Like when you're drying your laundry. And I just think of self-compassion as the one thing that holds all the other tools that I was given together. Because if I fail, but if I don't do any of the other things, then that self-compassion is still there. It's the thing that still holds me up. And one of the things that I did learn in my program was around the shoulds versus the wants, and trying to really change how I think about, oh, I should do that. And it's like, well, I should, but I literally work
Yeah.
job where there's a lot of shoulds I should do that I don't. And that's just the way that life is. But at the core of it, I love my job. I don't want to change my job. I enjoy what I do. So let's think about the positive stuff. And for me, it's about the baby steps in, okay, how can I make small improvements? Sometimes I will take food on board, and when I get on board, I don't want to eat it. I just don't feel like eating what I've prepared because I prepared it yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's not what I want today. So I just allow myself to go, well, you know what? I just don't want to eat that, and I'll have something else. And so I think it's taken time and intention, because it's really, I can't even explain how hard it is sometimes. And I think even the idea of what Sarah just said about being tired, I know that there have been times where I've got home, I've gone to bed, it's like daytime, gone to bed in the morning, I've thought I'm awake, I get up, I go in the cupboard, I eat something, and then I realize I'm actually not awake. And I go back to sleep. And I wake up going, oh my goodness, you just ate that and you weren't even awake. But that's what tiredness does. And it's being able to go, well, you know what? I was tired.
Yeah.
It's okay, Annie. Like, that's my thing. It's okay.
I know you've spoken before, Annie, about your aversion to the pressure to love your body. And I know you said, I don't love my body. And I would love you to speak to that sentiment, obviously in the context of your recovery.
Right, where do you start? I think so. When I was in recovery, I had my recovery guide. I was following, like, taking away those things and trying to implement them, doing work with the NHS and being like using my lived experience to try and help improve services and stuff. I came across a lot of obviously accounts and people who were very much around about, you should love yourself, calling yourself like, as if I'm a fat person, like this is what you should embrace, like all of that, body positive, anti-diet. And obviously I was still having like then my struggles with, well, I'm gaining weight and I don't like it. And so for a long time, I just kind of let it go. But I still felt that way. And I found it really, I felt pressured and guilty at times for wanting to lose weight, number one, and for not loving my body the way that I guess I should have done. Because, well, if you're recovered, then you should love the way you look and you should be able to wear clothes that you like, even if they're bigger, and you should be able to go and inspire other people and you shouldn't feel bad. And it's just like, well, I don't feel like that. I don't love the way I look. I don't love the way that my body is. I am thankful and I'm grateful for my body and all that it has brought me through. I acknowledge it. I see that. But I just struggle to really feel this love that I was meant to have. And also then the guilt of wanting to intentionally lose weight, wanting to make my body look different. I felt that guilt. And again, I just felt like, hang on a minute, this isn't right, because now this is putting me in another little box of shame and guilt, which eating disorder was doing before. And that's when I had to really just go, okay, I need to take a step away and try and find my own way, like try and figure this out for myself, because all this stuff is just not working for me. And obviously when you're online, you're just constantly bombarded with it. And with the kind of content I put out, you're obviously, the algorithm is saying, oh, you want to see this. And so, yeah, so I just kind of took a step away and just faced what I really felt and what I really wanted for me. And I remember, like, I think one of the big mindset shifts was, I think I watched one of your videos on YouTube, Sarah, and you were talking about body allowance. And that was just like, oh my gosh, like, I think I could do that. I think I do that sometimes when I don't think I look good enough to do something, but I still go and do it. And I just then set that intention of, okay, well, I don't have to try and love my body. I can just allow it to do the things that I want to do and not let it stop me. And I think that's what I did with my job, feeling like, oh, I don't look how crew should look, or how I thought I would look as this glamorous cabin crew member, but still going for it and still showing up and still putting on my uniform and being grateful that this helped me get out of bed, because I have to get up, I have to put on a uniform, I have to do my hair. So I think it's a journey that I'm still on, and it's then being able to find my own way as to what works for me and not necessarily what any kind of movement or culture says I should do, because I am aware that diet culture is not helpful, but I also know that the other extreme can also have the same impact as diet culture, in that it makes you feel bad about yourself.
Can you speak more to that? And also the way that you talked about thinking for yourself about it, almost like using that anti-diet culture idea to get to a different place, to kind of deconstruct the things diet culture taught you. How do you think about it now? How would you think about it, that maybe about like taking care of your body, or your thoughts about weight loss, or your thoughts about health? How do you stay balanced with it now?
So, okay, so I think one of my last posts I did before I stopped blogging was why I would never say diets don't work. And it's because of my perspective. Like, what I've done is, rather than say, oh, this diet failed me, I look at it and go, okay, I've tried like so many diets. But what did I learn from all of them? And so, for example, I've done diets where I've learned that actually eating a lot of vegetables and things actually makes me feel good and has had really good health benefits. But I remember doing keto and thinking, do you know what? I actually feel satisfied when I eat meat and cheese. And rather than going, okay, I'm going to do keto and cut out all carbs, or I'm going to go plant-based and eat all vegetables, I now go, well, actually, having some meat makes me feel satisfied, but also having the veg makes me feel like healthy. So now I can put the two together. I know, for example, even with fasting, I used to fast. Now intermittent fasting is a thing. I never really did it as intermittent fasting. It was always spiritual. So I know that fasting was probably, I felt the healthiest and fittest I ever have in my life, mentally, emotionally. So for me, it's like, rather than being told you can't fast, it's going, okay, I acknowledge that fasting makes me feel good mentally, spiritually, emotionally, but maybe I need to think about how I'm fasting. So, for example, I recognized with my job, because we cross time zones, I do not give my body enough time to just not eat. So I can leave here at like 8 in the morning and I land somewhere and it's 2 in the afternoon, and then I'm eating even longer. So I'm like nearly 24 hours I've just been eating. So whereas before I'd be like, right, every day I've got to fast for like 24 hours and have one meal and whatever. Now I'll be like, okay, Annie, just make sure you've given your body at least like 12, 13 hours where it's not had something to eat. Just consciously be intentional about that. It's not taking it to the extreme. It's just recognizing that this actually makes you feel better. So I think in terms of finding my own way, it's taking all the things that I've tried in the past and putting them together in a way that works for me, that I know works for me, rather than someone saying, oh, well, keto is the best way. You shouldn't eat carbs. This is the best way. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't count any calories. You shouldn't fast. You shouldn't. It's like, well, maybe there's some actual good things in all of them, but we need to take what works for us and put them together individually to write our own story and our own health and well-being journey. For example, I used to do long programs of workouts, 4 weeks of like every day you're doing a workout. Now I've got an app which has all the workouts I love to do. And I'll be like, what do I feel like doing today? I've just finished 7-day challenge of doing a week of one of the workouts I do. It's a 4-week program, but I decided for 7 days, I'm just going to do this, and I remember, I think it was on day 4, I just landed into San Francisco and I went out with the crew and I came back and it was, I don't know, maybe about 9. And I tried to do a workout and all I could do was 8 minutes. I was so tired. And I was just like, you know what? It's okay to stop and go to bed. I'll just make this my day off and then I'll do it the other side, rather than it being this rigid, this is what you have to do. And so that's why I think, yes, I'm not going to go and follow a diet. But also I'm not really anti-diet. I think you just need to be able to find things that work for you. And also I think one of the things I've written about or said is just, the word diet has almost been hijacked by this culture, because diet is really just, what do you eat, and that doesn't have to be that anything to do with restriction.
Right.
Diet is just, what are the foods that I'm putting in my body and what makes me feel good.
The way you were talking about self-compassion in the middle of that hanger, that's that pillar. I also think about critical thinking, and self-directed attunement as my hanger. And what you're talking about feels like that. It's like the part of you that's able to say, absent of the prescriptions that the external world has given me and that I have then internalized as shoulds, how do I think about it? Like, what actually makes sense for me? And I don't know that I, anyway, could do anything reliably, sustainably, without coming to it in here. It needs to make a lot of sense to me inside, not because like, oh, it makes sense to me because they told me that this works and that's what people do and it works for other people, et cetera, or that's what people expect of me. Every change I've ever made in a sustainable way towards my self-care came from it making sense here. And I wonder what you think about arriving in a place like that and being able to do that after having gone through what you went through, like going through the diets, going through the restrictions, going through all those things on the outside, then dismantling that based on the outside help and treatment, and then being able to be like, where do I sit with everything now?
Feel a lot freer. I just feel like I now am able to make decisions for myself. And when I had an eating disorder, I felt like I was trapped in this relationship where I had no say. Anything that I thought, it was like shut down. I then went into treatment and it was like, oh, but I'm struggling with this. Yeah, but you just got to follow the program. Okay, I'll follow the program. You come out and then you've got like this body positive, anti-diet, you've got to do, and it's like, oh, okay, but no, this doesn't feel right. And then you get to a point where you're just like, this is my life, this is my story, and that might be your story, but it's not me. I don't want to be called, I don't want to identify as I am a fat person. No, you might, but I don't. So that's okay. I'm not telling you shouldn't. I'm just saying that I don't want to, and I can own that. And now I think I'm just in a place where I'm like, what story do I want to write for my life? And I think that's my biggest message. I am an author and I write books, but I also have the power to create and write my own life. And in doing that, I have to take responsibility. But if I'm going to take responsibility, I also need to be able to make the decisions I want to for my life. If I put all these things together for myself and it doesn't feel good, then only I am responsible for that. And I can make the changes and I can make the tweaks. I left my job, the last job I had. I didn't know I was going to end up flying. I was like, okay, I'm just going to be an author, but I can't do this office job anymore. And then this job flying came along and it was like, oh, this is a dream and I'm going for it. I felt horrible, like in my body, but I wanted something. I made a decision and I went for it. And I got it and I love what I do. And that has then positively impacted the next step in my story. I've been able to move into a home on my own when I was so afraid of living by myself because I thought I was going to go crazy. Now I'm able to live on my own, took that step. And that then takes me to the next part of my story. I've kind of communicated this on my Instagram and on the Fat Ugly blog, is that where I was is just very different to where I am now. And I think it's such a massive deal to be able to go, oh, I do have the ability to write my story after recovery, after being in diet programs. I get to now write this story. I can do that. When I look back on my treatment program, I learned life skills and tools that I didn't have. I remember the session around owning your life. And I was just like, oh, I get to own my life. But it took me a couple of years to go, no, I'm going to own my life and I'm going to write it how I want to write it. So I think that's how I feel now. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to get everything right. I'm going to mess up at times, but that's okay. I will take responsibility for that. I don't have to blame anything or anyone else. That's just how I am. And that's what I choose to do.
That feels like a really lovely way to start drawing the conversation to a close. I know that you are passionate about helping people or using your lived experience to help others through it. So based on your lived experience, what are the things, what are the messages that you would want to impart or offer to people? Because you've been doing this, you've been going into the NHS and talking about your lived experience. So what are the messages?
Okay, so I think one of the things I realized with working in the NHS was just my presence alone as a Black woman who is in my 40s now. Just being there was just breaking all these stereotypes of who may be living with an eating disorder. Straight away, that was just, I didn't have to open my mouth, just my presence there just said it. And so I think it's, first of all, this does and can affect anyone. There's not a look, there isn't a stereotype of what it should be. And that there is help there and that you can go and get whatever help you think you need or that maybe you don't think you need, but can be helpful. And it can be really helpful because it's helped me. I think my biggest message that I try to communicate is kind of what I just said, which is you can get through really difficult things, whether it's an eating disorder or anything else, but you are the author of your own life story. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to not know what you're doing. It's okay to feel lost, because that's all part of the story that you're writing. I just like to use my experience to just show people that there was a point where, you know, I hated myself, like not even just how I looked. I hated myself. I hated my life. I didn't want to be alive. And I've got to this point where I'm now taking control of my life. I'm accepting that I'm just a human being. I live a lifestyle that I've always dreamed of. I fly, absolutely love my job, living in a home that I absolutely love. And I rewrote that. And that's what I hope I can inspire other people to just have hope and believe that you can as well. So I think that's ultimately my message. And I just hope that my lived experience can help other people to really just believe that for themselves.
Mm. And what I love is you didn't wait to change your body to do any of those things. It's not like, oh, when my body is this size, shape, or feels this way, then I'll do these things. And
Yeah.
that's another message I hear, which I just love because I'm passionate about that one.
Yeah. I mean, even yesterday, I went to a sixth form college to talk to a group of, there's 6 of us from work. And we went there, and it's like 30 odd sixth form students, and we were talking to them about our job, what we do. We were running like group exercises and stuff. And I remember before just feeling like, oh gosh, I don't think I can do this, because I don't feel comfortable enough in my own body, in my uniform to go there. But I went and I had the most amazing day. It was so fulfilling, just like being able to just, I don't know, just like encourage these young people. I had a great time with my colleagues, and I left there and I felt like I really enjoy recruitment. Like I love this process and giving feedback and stuff. So I learned something about myself. I had a great day. I had a great day with my colleagues. My colleagues learned stuff about me that I didn't know, and vice versa. And I could have allowed my body to stop me experiencing that. But because, again, like just going, okay, Annie, you can do it. It's okay. Like you're absolutely fine. It allowed me to experience that, which you just think all the things you can miss out on just because, you know, you think, oh, well, I don't look this way yet. But just go for it.
Love that. Thank you, Annie.
And just to remind people, where can they find you, and is your book's coming out soon?
Yes. So, yeah. My website is thefatuglyblog.com, and I am on Instagram at thefatuglyblog. And then on there, I have like my free recovery guide. So that is just those top 10 takeaways that I got from my treatment program. And I kind of, because I'm a creative person, I just put it into a nice thing that was colorful and easy to access. And then I will obviously update with regards to when the book is out on there as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.